After this news, it became absolutely clear why, the day before, Vladimir Putin so boldly stated that Russia would unconditionally demand international recognition of the Ukrainian occupied territories as Russian. It turned out that United States President Donald Trump had already promised Vladimir Putin full recognition of his war of conquest and recognition of the Ukrainian territories as Russian. It is important to note that the day before, Vladimir Putin directly stated that the main thing now is for countries like the United States of America to recognize the occupation. Regarding Ukraine, he said an agreement would be reached later. And today the Telegraph reports that United States President Donald Trump is willing to recognize Russian control over Crimea and other occupied territories of Ukraine as part of the so-called peace plan. Moreover, it is reported that the proposal to recognize the Ukrainian lands seized by Russia during the war will be personally delivered to Putin by Trump's special envoy, Stephen Witkoff, who is expected to visit Moscow next week together with Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. What does this say? That Trump is simply trying to make some kind of business deal? This isn't about a peace plan at all. That's why the Kremlin stated that they are ready to keep fighting until all Ukrainian troops are pushed out of Donbas. But that's not all. And the proposal that Witkoff and Kushner are bringing to the dictator Putin is, to put it mildly, shocking. It turned out that Donald Trump refused to show Europe the points of the peace plan that specifically concern the European security architecture. That's why Europe fears Donald Trump is abandoning it to Putin. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic. Before we begin, please subscribe and like the channel. Subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. Any support you can give is appreciated. So, the Telegraph reports today that the United States of America is ready to recognize Russia's control over Crimea and other occupied territories of Ukraine in order to reach an agreement to end the war. According to the Telegraph, Donald Trump sent his peace envoy Stephen Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner to make a direct offer to Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And here is a frightening quote for you. Instead, they break the diplomatic traditions of the United States. Most likely it will be implemented despite the concerns of Ukraine's European allies. One well-informed source said that it is becoming increasingly clear that the Americans do not care about Europe's position. They say that Europeans can do whatever they want, meaning that Europeans can disagree as much as they like. But if Russia eventually attacks Europe, the United States will not intervene and will only offer to act as an arbitrator. And here I would like to note that Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that legal recognition by Washington of Crimea, as well as the Donetsk and Luhansk regions as Russian territory, will be one of the key issues in negotiations on the United States president's peace plan. And here is the most telling quote from the dictator Putin, in which he directly states that he is afraid. He is afraid that Ukraine will want to reclaim the occupied territories in the future, territories that are legally Ukrainian, and therefore, to prevent this, he demands full international recognition of the Russian seizures. And paradoxically, Trump absolutely agrees with this. History apparently teaches nothing, since there was already a Munich Agreement in the 20th century. Let me remind you that less than a year after that, World War II began. Here's a Vladimir Putin quote. Everything is clear now. He didn't say it without a reason.
Of course, we want to eventually reach an agreement with Ukraine, but right now it's practically impossible. It's impossible legally. Anyone from their side who can and wants to, let them negotiate. We need our decisions to be internationally recognized by the main international players. That's all. And that matters because it's one thing when decisions are recognized and, let's say, certain territories are under Russian sovereignty. And in case of a violation of the agreement, it would be considered an attack on the Russian Federation, with all the resulting retaliatory measures from Russia. Or will it be perceived as an attempt to reclaim territory that rightfully belongs to Ukraine? These are different things. That's why we need recognition. but not from Ukraine right now. I hope that in the future we will be able to come to an agreement with Ukraine after.
After that, the Kremlin announced on Friday that it had received a revised strategy for ending the war, developed following emergency talks between Ukrainian and American officials in Geneva last weekend. Initially, the original 28-point peace plan formulated by Vitkov after discussions with Russian officials called for the de facto recognition by America of Crimea and the two eastern regions of Donbas as Russian. The strategy also proposed de facto recognition of the Russian-held territories beyond the line of contact in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions after a ceasefire agreement is reached. In other words, essentially, America was initially saying that it would de facto recognize Russia's control in the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, and de jure effectively in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, as well as in Crimea. And here I can now give you a quote from that very peace plan. It appeared in its original form after there had been several different leaks. Here is point 21 of the peace plan, quote, Russia will give up other agreed territories that it controls outside of the 5 regions. Ukrainian troops will withdraw their forces from the part of Donetsk region they control. And this withdrawal zone will be considered a neutral demilitarized buffer zone, attention, internationally recognized territory of the Russian Federation. Russian troops will not enter this demilitarized zone. That is, the peace plan itself already includes recognition, international recognition, of the territories seized by the Russians. Although it is reported that in Geneva, representatives of Ukraine and the United States agreed on a new plan consisting of 19 points, which is less favorable to Moscow, no one has publicly presented the new plan. And now there are doubts that this point was removed from there. Moreover, today numerous sources suggest that the American proposals for recognition remain part of the strategy. The Ukrainian delegation might have agreed to this for United States security guarantees. And here I will explain. Politicians, including Ukrainian ones, seem to have started a very dirty game. After all, essentially Kiev, you see. The authorities of Zelensky's team will not be forced to recognize Russia's control over the territories they illegally annexed. Since 2014, the Constitution of Ukraine prohibits any president or government from ceding territories without first discussing the issue with the people in a nationwide referendum. That's why Donald Trump says, listen, Ukrainians, Zelensky's team, you may not recognize anything, but America will. And then, internationally, these territories will become Russian, and any attempt by Ukraine in the future to legitimately reclaim these territories will be considered an attack on Russia. It's shocking, since that's exactly what Putin mentioned the day before. And right before his resignation, the head of the office of the president of Ukraine, Andrei Yermak, who was negotiating the latest peace plan, stated, quote, as long as Zelensky is president. No one should expect us to cede territory. He won't sign an agreement to give up land. The constitution forbids it. Doing this would go against the Ukrainian constitution and people. And the thing is, if the United States of America recognizes these territories as Russian, then unfortunately in the international format it won't really matter anymore whether Zelensky recognizes it or not. That's the whole tragedy. That's what we needed to fight against, to make sure the United States didn't recognize these lands as Russian. Washington's obvious proposal for recognition caused concern among European allies, who have repeatedly ruled out supporting a peace agreement that allows for the forcible redrawing of borders. That's why the Europeans rewrote that very point 21 of the peace plan as follows. Quote, Ukraine undertakes not to return the occupied sovereign territories by military means. Negotiations on territorial exchange will begin from the line of contact. And it's important to remember that until now, the United States and Europe have refused to recognize Russia's control over Crimea, the peninsula that Putin illegally annexed in 2014. To offer legitimacy regarding stolen territory in favor of the aggressor state would mean Washington violating diplomatic norms. Even China has not officially recognized Crimea as Russian. Well, as for Trump, it seems he absolutely doesn't care about any of these norms. But should we really be surprised by the Trump team's policy after a leak of phone calls showed that Trump's chief negotiator, Steve Witkoff, was teaching Russian officials how to flirt with the White House? In the leaked conversations with Russian negotiators, there was mention of the need for Ukraine to give up Donetsk, and Witkoff directly said that Russia would get it. By the way, all source intelligence analysts have already conducted their own investigation and suggest that the leak of Witkoff's conversations with Ushakov was the work of the European Intelligence Agency, because the Europeans are trying to thwart Trump's attempts to hand Ukraine over to Putin. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles.